So the first topic for tonight is going to be our review of Shang Chi, the latest Marvel movie, came out this past weekend. In theaters only. So this is the first movie that's since the pandemic started that has been in theaters only for Marvel. It did very well in terms of financials. It smashed records for Labor Day weekend, which isn't a big movie weekend. Which I guess I never really thought.
I'm surprised
it
isn't. Yeah, it feels like
Yeah.
it should be, but I don't know.
Right.
I don't know how that works because like that first weekend in May is a huge weekend.
Right.
You think
Right.
that last weekend of the summer is
sure.
like a big weekend, but yeah, no, they crushed records and that's good for it.
Yeah, I think it made like 90 million.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's domestic or worldwide. The previous record holder was Halloween Kills from 2007 with like 30 million. So and I think that Disney was very much made about 170 million worldwide.
Nice. Wow.
So that's pretty good through the first weekend. But we'll see what kind of tail it has. When you saw it, how many people were in your theater?
4, but it was a
4.
It was a Wednesday at 4:45.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, I saw it on Sunday night at 8:30. I want to say there was probably about 20 people in the theater. So, with everything that's going on, I think that 170 million is probably a good number.
Yeah.
I think that probably sells Disney on not making the Eternals a hybrid release, because I think this was going to say, okay, we're either going to do a hybrid release for the Eternals, or if this does well, maybe we'll just leave it in theaters for 45 days.
I would imagine this exceeded expectations based purely on the everything going on in the world. And the fact that this is a character that no one knows anything about. I've never met a single person that's read these comics, knows much about them other than occasionally like an Iron Man reference or something like that. But no one sat down and actually has read these comics that I know of.
Sure.
So, I will say it's probably a good sign for the Eternals too, in the sense that we don't know anything about this. And we'll break into like the storyline, the spoilers and stuff, but the fact that you're able to get some characters that are well known involved really bolstered this movie for me personally, to help it kind of move along. And then the characters themselves that we didn't know anything about were, I think, a good sign for things moving forward.
So, spoiler free, what were your thoughts of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings?
Honestly, like you and I talked about, we were both very excited because we both like kung fu movies and it's Marvel. And so it was a good combination of that for sure. And, also like those 2000s, 2000 to 2009, like those Asian inspired movies that came out, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, movies like that. It was like a good representation of those because I love those too. And then it was still Marvel though, in the sense of you still had that feeling that it was that comic book movie, and there was still the back and forth of it being Marvel, and you knew it was Marvel the entire time. So I would say I had pretty high expectations, and it worse matched them and probably exceeded them when I actually go back. And in the moment I was like very pumped, but you always are kind of pumped coming out of a movie like that. And then taking it back and looking at what I thought, I was like, this was, it was at least as good as I was hoping, if not better.
Yeah, I think that the main thing, and this is the statement I'm going to make, is hard to make without it being a spoiler statement. And we are going to get into spoilers, so I'll be able to explain it in a little bit more depth. The reason I feel like Captain America and the Winter Soldier is a great movie, not just a great Marvel movie, but a great movie, is because it is a great spy thriller that happens to be a Marvel movie.
Right.
In the
Exactly.
case of this movie, I felt like it had the opportunity to be a great kung fu movie that happens to be a Marvel movie.
Mhm.
But towards the end of the movie, I felt like they almost ruined a perfectly good kung fu movie by making it a Marvel movie. And that's hard to say without like getting into what I mean by that, which we
Sure.
will in a
No.
moment. But as far as like exceeding expectations or meeting expectations, I would say the first two acts of the film exceeded my expectations. And then the final act was kind of a letdown for me. But there's very specific reasons as to why. So with that being said, if you're a Marvel person, and you don't want the spoilers part of this, definitely go see this, or see it
Yes.
in whichever way you are comfortable seeing it. So if that means that you need to wait till it's on Disney Plus, then you wait till it's on Disney Plus. But see this movie, because I do think that it is very good for most of it, but the end was kind of a letdown for me. So with that being said, spoilers are
Spoilers.
incoming.
I think the thing that I like, I agree with you. I actually do agree with you. And the first two acts were much stronger than the third, but you do have to tie it into the Marvel universe at some point, and that's just and that can help some. It actually probably helps some of the movies that we've liked in the past, or
Right.
and it just happened to hurt this one because, like you said, it could have been a great kung fu movie, but then we had to go Marvel, and I don't of course you had to do that. I really liked Shang Chi. I really liked him, Sean,
Yeah.
and so he was great like the whole way through. Just the Simu Liu, is that how you say his name?
Simu Liu, who was
Liu.
a stunt man and a stock photo
Yeah,
model.
yeah,
He's Canadian. I thought he was excellent. So let's just
he was great.
we'll just roll through like the main cast here real quick.
Yeah,
Sean or Shang-Chi, Simu Liu, Aquafina is his friend Katie. His mother was played by Fala Chen. Manger Zhang played his sister Jialing. And Tony Luang played their father Wenwu Zhu, or Zhu Wenwu. We also got some smaller roles. Michelle Yeoh, who played Ying Non, his aunt, his mother's sister. She's probably most notable. She plays one of the leads in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
yeah,
Florian Montaneau, Razor Fist, which that car is hilarious.
it is.
Who he's most notable for playing Ivan Drago's son in Creed 2. Obviously, we get Benedict Wong as Wong, and the return of Trevor Slattery.
Yes.
The great Sir Ben Kingsley. So, and we'll get to that because that's way more than I thought it was going to be. But that's
me too.
I think that's a that sort of thing. So he himself, Shang-Chi, Simu Liu.
He's great. He captured this whole thing of like he was still this kind of guy that and they do it with the end where like he still wants to party and still wants to be like not fully adapting to the part of being a superhero or however you want to say it. But he still he's got a good humor to him. He obviously looks like a superhero. He does the metamorphosis of him becoming like the normal guy to the hero because he was trying to get away from it, but then getting back into it. It felt real to me. Like, sometimes it seemed forced, but it came through because he thought he could handle it. He thought he could handle it. And then when he gets, put into the water and he kind of sees these flashes or whatever, and that kind of builds him back up with the coming out with the dragon and everything. I thought that was, it all works. I mean, excuse me, everything can't be a book where there's a ton of development. It is still a movie, but in the scheme of a movie, I thought the development of him learning to be a hero was great. Aquafina is just terrific. I'm always a fan of Aquafina. I thought her, her comic timing was perfect in this. Her storyline of her mom just wanting her to be better than she was, and she even says like, once I get good at something, I stop, and all this kind of stuff. And the fact that she just kind of dives into trying to to be an archer, and she gets good at it, and then she's thrown into this, and her roles ends up being very, very important. Shooting the evil dragon in the neck with an arrow. And then they still kind of laugh it off at the end when they're telling the story to their friends. Cause I thought that was just like a really, we talk about Marvel being serious, but then at the end, they're like telling the story to their friends about all this outlandishly crazy stuff that happens. And their friends are just like, sorry, we made fun of you the last time. You don't have to make up stories for us. And then Wong comes through and makes the whole thing. Yeah. So, I just thought it was like I said, I thought it at least met my expectations. It was a fun movie. It moved very, very quickly. And that was another thing I really enjoyed. There wasn't a lot of slow moments. Sometimes there's some storytelling moments, but once you it always felt like it knew its timing very well. And I think that's what really, made it good for me, is that there was nothing slow. Not that, even long Marvel movies, we've said, can go by pretty quickly because they know their timing. But this one, since it was out of our realm of expertise on the comics or whatever, I felt like I knew these characters. I will say that too. Like, I was pretty engrossed with these characters 15 minutes in.
So break down kind of the good and the bad for me.
The good. Oh no, I thought you were asking me.
No,
oh,
yeah,
okay.
no. I'm going to break down the good and the bad for me. My opinions on the good and bad.
Okay.
So the good, we talked about the lead, Simu Liu. He was good. I didn't think that he was exceptional, but I thought that he played the role well. To me, the scene stealer was his father, the antagonist, Tony.
Oh yeah.
Tony Lang. Because we talk so much about Marvel having a problem with villains where it's an evil version of the main character. Their goals are very shallow, that sort of thing. And I thought this was a case of him being a very empathetic antagonist.
Oh, sure.
To the point where there were times where you're almost rooting for him. He's convinced that his wife who died, and like, he changed his life. He became a good person for his wife. He had children. He became a good person. You see the scene where she's killed and how he handles it. And it drives him back into being a bad person, basically. And when he's convinced, at first I was like, okay, this is just some bull crap that he's trying to play games with his son and daughter to get them to go along with it so that he can steal the mystical powers of this village or whatever. But he was legitimately convinced that his wife was calling out to him. And to me, he's like top three bad guy, top three villain after this.
Yeah.
I thought that he was the absolute scene stealer of this movie. And I was really bummed in a sense that there's really, it's Marvel and it's comics, and we've seen what, the Infinity Stones and blah, blah, blah. No one's ever really dead. But it kind of bummed me out that they put him in a position where it's going to be very hard to bring him back into any kind of sequel or anything like that. Maybe flashbacks. I don't know. But I feel like that's a character that you want to have around. But, the same can be said of Killmonger. So there's that.
Right.
The ending battle scene, I liked at first how it was contained between the 10 rings and the villagers of this sort of mystical realm. I didn't care for the fact that they felt the need to tie this into the multiverse, because they said this is part of a different universe and there's a thing and all this crap. It's like they can't get out of the way long enough to be able to tell a story that doesn't serve the bigger story in some way. And that's kind of a bummer for me. It's just like, I just wanted to tell a coherent ground-based story, which was where this was trending towards until the final act. And then I just really didn't care for the battle between the good dragon and the bad dragon. And I thought that was where it lost me a little bit, in terms of they took what was a perfectly good kung fu movie, the bus scene, the scaffolding scene on the side of the building.
Yes.
Some of those other, the training montages, all of those great, the scene where he fights his wife, like that was just straight up, hand to hand, crouching tiger, hidden dragon style combat.
Yeah.
It was dope. And so to go from those scenes in those different parts of the film to the end where it was like, all right, we got to CG this bitch. We got to get some CGI going in this bitch. It was just kind of a bummer because it felt like it took, like, to me, and it felt like it took a movie where I was at that time. It was like a 9 and it dropped it down to like a 7. And that's how much I did not like the end. Like the end really soured me.
I would say that I'm a 7, and just in the fact that these movies, Marvel movies, are tough. There's really, really good ones. And, I put this in the realm of, I honestly look at it, and, we talk about these movies going, whatever. This is, to me, as good as the second Spider-Man movie. That's kind of where I put it in my realm of things, even though I was like, even though I knew the character and everything, that's kind of where I walked away from it from, which is probably higher. It was that's definitely higher than I would have thought, taking that it was a character I knew nothing about. And I agree with you. The ending scene, I was kind of out of it with the two dragons fighting each other, because you did kind of just want it to be mano-a-mano.
Yeah.
He and his dad fighting it out. And,
right.
And I understand why they went that direction, because of the whole red dragon thing and all that. Like, I understand why they did it. And probably for people that do not like kung fu movies like we do. I mean, you and I think you and I are the one, two of people that I know that like kung fu movies, and that might be it. I think me, maybe the only two people I know that actually like seriously would just sit down and watch like old kung fu movies. There is something about that. Like, I loved all those scenes. I was going to point out the scene where he's fighting his, soon to be wife. And like, I was like getting chills during that scene. I absolutely like was floored by it. So yeah, I mean, I still give it like, it's funny that we both landed on 7, even though you seem like lower on the end than I did. And we'll get to it, but like I think something that helped too is, the end credit stuff. It kind of got me pumped, got me re-pumped.
Yeah.
So
That's sort of what brought me back in, but I was riding very high on this movie.
Yeah.
Until the final act. And I just didn't need it to be like, as soon as they go through the portal and it's like this mystical land of Pokemon characters. Like, I didn't need that, I mean, I get it if that's the story that they felt like they needed to tell, but I think it just would have been more interesting to, like you said, mano a mano with his dad, and they have a fight and he takes the rings and, whatever, he does that, but it's just like, we don't need flying squid demons, and we don't need giant, freaking Pokemon characters. Like, I didn't, you know what I mean? That was just me.
I did like Morris though. I will say I did like Morris.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about that. Morris, I couldn't get it out of my head that it reminded me of the Ottoman from Beauty and the Beast.
Sure, yeah.
It doesn't have a face.
Yeah.
Right.
How come he doesn't have a face? Oh, he doesn't like to talk about that.
The redemption.
Yeah.
Really, of Trevor Slattery, the villain, the Mandarin from Iron Man 3. They took the time to like retcon and like explain all that basically Aldrich Killian paid them to be able to use the 10 rings and call him the Mandarin, and it ended up being this, as we know, Ben Kingsley and Trevor and all that. So they took the time and the care to sort of like figure that out and make those connections. I was like, okay, that's cool, whatever. And we knew that Ben Kingsley was in this because he was at the premiere, but we didn't know to what depth. And the reality of it was, we got way more of him than I thought that we would get.
in a good way.
In a great way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It was like, I loved it.
It was the same sort of like funny character that he played in Iron Man 3, but it also showed, he's clean now and he wants to help.
Yeah.
And he's,
He
doing
wants
the
to
right
perform.
thing. He just wants to perform. He just wants to do the right thing. He's teaching the village kids how to play soccer. Boris comes up to him. He thinks he's dead. And he says, I'm playing a role, mate. And, I thought it was a really nice way to kind of end, I assume, that character's story arc. I love that they released Hail to the King on Disney Plus, the Marvel one shot that shows him in prison like a week before this came out. If people hadn't seen that or haven't seen it still, I strongly suggest you check that out. But what did you think overall about Ben Kingsley returning as the fake Mandarin? Well, not even the fake man. The head of hair was shocking to me.
Yeah. I loved it. And like, even when it first happened, you're like, oh, he's just going to like tell them a thing. And then he actually hops in the car with them and he's got Morris and like, he's the only one that can understand Morris. And that was really funny.
Stay in the pocket.
Yeah. Stay in the pocket. What does that mean? Just, well, if you don't get in, you're going to be sucked in. And it was just like, it was like, the thing I'll say, it was cute in the most Marvel way possible. It was like a cute thing to have him in this and have him be important. And like you said, it was a redemption arc. It kind of, I mean, I like Iron Man 3, but it did like redeem it. Probably for some people that might redeem that movie more to people. If they go back and watch it now, that character probably seems
problems with that.
Yeah. And so like now it kind of makes more sense. You could go back and maybe look at it differently. Which I'm guessing people will they'll probably be like, I'm sure someone out there will write a story, be like, well, now I think Iron Man 3 is whatever because of this redemption arc kind of thing. No, I loved it. I mean, Ben Kingsley very rarely, I don't think he's ever let me down. And so for him to have this role and for it to be, like I said, an actual cute role it was great. And you never got tired of any time he was on camera.
No. And you'd like to see if they, for some reason, go back to that. You'd like to see him pop up again. But if he doesn't, I think it was great that we just got a little bit of him in this. And that kind of brings us to the two end credit scenes. I think we'll go with the second one first.
That's what I was going to do.
The second one shows, he tells his sister or his sister, Jialing is supposedly dismantling the 10 rings, and it shows her back at Wenwu's compound, and she's essentially taking over and becoming the new lead of the 10 rings. And that's where we land on, is not Shang-Chi will return, because obviously we do the Marvel movies, we get, Spider-Man will return, Captain America, whatever. We don't get Shang-Chi will return, we get the 10 rings will return.
Right.
And I read like an excerpt from an interview with Kevin Feige, and he had said like it was assumed that Shang-Chi would return based on everything.
Right.
So they felt it necessary to say that the 10 rings will return. I'm not sure how she's going to run things. She doesn't have the actual 10 rings. He does. So that's kind of interesting. Where do you think the 10 rings will pop up at next?
My guess is, because they weren't sure, and my guess is it's probably a movie that hasn't been talked about yet, or not like production wise yet.
Sure.
So if they weren't sure how this was going to perform or how people are going to react to it, it almost feels like it will be. I was literally trying to think about this as it was happening. Like, where can this possibly happen? And my best guess is not at the end of phase 4, whatever the end of phase 4 is. I think that's kind of where, and we don't know where that's trending or what we actually are getting from the multiverse, but that's where I feel like that's where the 10 rings will appear, is more towards the end of this phase. And that could be 2 years down the road, or it could be 4. We really don't know. There's no timeline on this. So I liked it. I liked that this is a thing. I think this is something that can keep us more grounded, even, you know what, even though grounded now is these mystical worlds still on Earth, but it's not gonna, nothing will ever be Captain America grounded. Even when we get the new Captain America movie,
Right.
you know, there's still going to be multiverse. They're going to have to do it for whatever reason, but this is about as grounded as things can get at this point. Is at least we're on Earth, you know, and that's kind of where we're at. So my guess is probably towards the end, because we're going to get a lot of multiverse, and we know it's coming with the movies that are happening literally in 2 months, and then we're just getting bombarded with it. I texted you today, so many movies coming out. We're gonna be like, so many movies.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm more interested in this, where this goes, than I'm interested in any multiverse stuff. We've talked about it. I just think the multiverse thing's lazy. And it's kind of a bummer to me, because it's like, wow, this is how we're going to get this is how we're going to make the old Spider-Man movies canon. This is how we're going to make the old X-Men movies canon. This is how we're going to make the old Fantastic Four movies canon. Because now it can all be canon because it's multiverse. It's lazy. Get rid of that stuff.
My thing would be like, until we actually get into those movies,
it's hard to say.
It's hard for me to say. Like, I agree with you in theory that this is lazy in theory, but if that's just background noise, and we get the new movies and they're great and all this stuff, then I won't care.
I think it's probably pretty fair to say that of the two of us, I'm more pessimistic and you're more optimistic about things. So
yeah, I think
we all have our roles to play.
Yeah, that's just my general theme. Unless it's about my actual sports teams, then I'm just overall pessimistic. But
so the other end credit scene, they're analyzing the 10 rings. Katie and Shang-Chi are with Wong in the sanctum of Kamar-Taj, and with them on, FaceTime or whatever they use to communicate, is Bruce Banner.
Space-time.
Bruce Banner, no longer Smart Hulk, actual Bruce, arm in a sling. So it's fairly recent. And Captain Marvel, hair grown back out.
Right.
And they're talking about, the 10 rings they're not
looking good, Brie Larson.
Looking great. They're not vibranium. They're not of this world. They're not of anything that she can identify. And then she gets there. It is a homing beacon. What is it a homing beacon for? I don't know. And then Captain Marvel's like, I got to go. Deuces.
Yeah.
So theories on who is it signaling and who did she have to go deal with? Because we know the Marvels is coming, I believe, next fall to winter 23, 22. Who is it calling and who is she off to deal with?
My initial reaction of I got to do something in space is Silver Surfer. And maybe that's because you and I both love Silver Surfer, and that's kind of where I want things to go, because if you do Silver Surfer right, he's awesome, or it's awesome, however,
Yeah.
That was my initial feeling on this, is it's Silver Surfer. If it, on the bad side of things, then I also go in another direction that you and I both like, Doctor Doom. So maybe that's where you connect Fantastic Four in, either way, with Silver Surfer or Doctor Doom. And like I've said, you can make Fantastic Four good. You just need to have the right people doing it. That was my initial theory, was she's got to go to space. I just don't think we're going to get a big bad for a little while. And Doctor Doom's he's a big bad, but he's not a big bad. He can't destroy, worlds on worlds. He's not eating worlds or anything like that. He's a big bad. He's awesome. He's my favorite villain in Marvel Comics. But it's hard for me to think big bad right now. And maybe I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, that's cool. I don't know which big bad we want to go with.
Well, the reality is the next big bad is going to be Kang. I mean,
right. But in the sense
I don't think that because I think the same thing. That was my initial thought too, was that one of these two things, who it's a beacon for, or who does she have to go deal with, was Surfer. But if you're doing Surfer, you have to do Galactus, and they're not going to do Galactus and Kang at the same time. You can't imagine they would. That'd be craziness. I mean, I guess it's possible.
Unless Galactus is part of the Kang storyline, which is a lot going on.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Is you have to focus it in. The other thing too is that, and I think that this kind of goes underappreciated, and we just did all the Marvel movies, is there was no worrying about all of this.
Right.
Until really halfway through phase 2, the end of phase 2. Like, I think the first time that they really started to talk about the Infinity Stones was Thor Dark World. So at that point, you're like 7 movies in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then Ultron, he's like, we're trying to protect us from the outside.
Right.
And you start realizing.
So that's when you realize they're setting things up. Obviously, you get the Thanos cameo at the end of the first Avengers. But there wasn't like Iron Man 3 was not tied into, like, you could skip Iron Man 3. Quite frankly, you could skip Iron Man 3. You could conceivably skip Winter Soldier. You shouldn't, but you could.
You shouldn't, but you could. You could actually storyline of things get it.
You could probably skip Ant-Man.
Yep.
And these. So that's the thing. It's like there were not. All of those movies, there weren't like, okay, we have to mention this, we have to mention that. And so I think that kind of that's when it kind of becomes a little bit too much, where it's like, okay, and it was like that in the comics, where you're reading Infinity Gauntlet and it's like, see issue 47 of Fantastic Four to get this shit explained to you.
Right, exactly.
I mean? Like in the subtitles or whatever, the sidebars. So I think the further they go, and we kind of knew this was going to happen a little bit because things were going to get weird, the more the more actually comic booky these things are getting, because there is going to be like, well, if you want this scene explained to you, see episode 4 of Loki season 1.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so that's going to be, but it's going to become freaking Charlie from Always Sunny, and he's got the board and the pins and the strings and all that shit. And that's what it's going to be moving forward. But the problem is, it's not going to be like that for us. It's going to be for the people actually making these things.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's kind of where it gets into a little bit of trouble. I think personally that this is just a direct setup for the Eternals.
Yeah, you're probably right. I was probably, for me, nerding out, I probably
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not a fun prediction, but it's probably
it's just set up for the Eternals, which is fine. I mean, the Eternals, had its trailer, and Spider-Man had its trailer, and I still feel about the same way as I do for both. Eternals, I'm whatever, and Spider-Man, I'm like, give me it right now and put it in my veins. I'm okay with that. But we can. Any final thoughts before we move on?
See it.
Yeah,
in some form or another.
If you like kung fu movies and you don't like Marvel, you'll still like most of it.
You'll still like most of it.
And then if you are a Marvel person, you'll like the whole movie because it's awesome in that scheme of things.